Okay, welcome to MassFX. And you can get all the stuff you need for MassFX by coming up here and right-clicking on your toolbar and getting the MassFX toolbar. And it's MassFX. Okay, and so it's been added right here. I'm gonna move mine down here. I already have enough stuff. And you can get, when you're done with modeling, you can cycle right there to make that smaller. Okay, so I have the toolbar here with my MassFX, and there's also MassFX utilities here. And usually lets me pull it off. It's not letting me pull it off. Okay. Let's see. Well, all right, we could just use it. We can use it through here. There's usually a pull off. So you can pull this off. But we'll work with it from the animation tab. Okay, so we've got our tools we need and our tools we need. Okay, so what we're going to do first to start, and I want to walk you guys through setting this up because there's some important things to know. When you're working with anything in 3D Studio Max that's going to be affected by MassFX, it can't start out by touching anything else. It'll cause it to explode. So I have a block that I put here. I'm going to build a bunch of them. And the first thing I'm going to do is get it up off the ground. You can zoom in here so that it's barely off the ground, but you don't want it touching. Because what happens if you start these off on the ground and they're touching, when you tell it to start the MassFX event, it will cause them all to explode. And you'll be like, well, what just happened? It was touching something, so it created a reaction. Okay, so I've zoomed in and it's barely off the ground. Nobody will know. The next thing I want to do is I want to copy these, and I'm going to zoom in again and make sure I get them close to each other but not touching. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down my shift key and I'm going to pull out my arrow. Whoa, what did you just do? Drive me nuts. I hate when it does that. I don't know why it does that. This thing it does. Okay, let's try this again. So I'm going to hold down my shift key, zoom way in there, and there we go. Pull it off, and very little daylight between them, but they're not touching. And so I'm going to do 9, because it counts the first one. And I now have 10 blocks lined up. Now I want to do the same thing up. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to select them all and zoom in. And same thing. Shift, and then you want very little space because they're going to fall. Okay, and we're going to do 9 in that direction. Alright, so I have a wall of blocks that are not touching each other. Now, initially what's going to happen, gravity is going to take over and they're going to fall that distance. So you want your gaps to be very, very narrow, very small. Okay, and then one last thing we're going to do, we're going to select that whole wall and we're going to copy it this way so that we end up with a cube. Okay, shift. And it's very little daylight between them. Just make sure they're not touching. Oh, crap, I wanted to do more. All right, let's try this again. Okay, 8 this time. Okay, and so now you see I have this giant cube of blocks. And I'm going to move my plane. Everything's sitting on a plane, and you're going to need a plane. if you do this without LUN, everything is going to fall down the minute you start your reaction. Okay, and I have a car, and you can see that car right here, and it's really just a box. It's nothing more than that. And I'm going to move my plane so that the blocks are in the middle. Actually, let's make that a little bit longer and bigger. Let's make it 800 and 1200. Okay. We just don't have a magic carpet ride going on there. All right, so box, car, everything's set up here. So what I want to do is, I'm going to move this back actually. I want to move it. Okay. It needs to look like it's gained enough momentum. So I'm moving it back. Okay, so what I'm going to do is this. In my left view, I'm going to set up my time configuration to change it to 300. Okay. And I'm going to turn on my auto key, select my car, which I'm gonna manually operate. Set key, and then at frame 80, I'm going to move the car to the other side of the blocks. Okay, and then I'm going to turn off this. So that in my animation now, when I play this out, the car looks like it hits and goes through the blocks. Okay, so my car's driving and going through the blocks. And that looks good. I mean, I could probably speed this up a little bit. Let's move it to 70. Just select it and move it over. And that will make it go just a little bit faster. There we go. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we now need to start assigning designations to our parts and pieces. All right. So one of the things we need to briefly talk about is basic physics. Okay. Yes, I did. Okay, so the toolbar that we have is going to talk about this is the one we're looking for. I guess I just try to pull that off. So I hooked it up there. It's just not letting me pull it off now. Okay, anyway, sorry about that. Okay, so what you're going to see is there's we have to tell the software what each part of our equation is. We have to identify it. Okay, in order for it to run the physics simulator, which is what MassFX is, it needs to know how to represent each object and what the equation is. Okay, and so there are dynamic rigid bodies, kinematic rigid bodies, and static rigid bodies, and we have to define which one is which in our equation. Okay, so shapes. This is just kind of walking through the whole thing. Let's see if it gave a. No, it doesn't. It's just doing the convex thing here. I was going to give you guys something where you could write this down. What they are. I put it in the, it's in the announcements. in the class. Let's go to this. I think it might say here, just so you have a definition. Okay, so Autodesk. Here we go, rigid body overview. All right, so this is in 30 Studio Max Learning and Support from Autodesk, and it's just a basic overview of rigid bodies. All right, so by definition, a rigid body is an object that's in our physical simulation whose shape and size do not change. Okay, let's see, I'm going to skip all this. Okay, here we go. So here are the definitions. A dynamic rigid body is like an object in the real world. It's subject to gravity and other forces. It bumps into other objects, and it can be pushed by those objects. All right? So in the MassFX simulation, the physical representation of the object is updated from knowing that it is a real-world object. A dynamic object cannot use a concave physical shape. However, we can simulate that. All right. A kinematic body is a puppet moved by the strings of your animation. It's not subject to gravity or other forces. It can push any dynamic objects it encounters, but it cannot be pushed by them. The graphical mesh is controlled by 3D Studio Max. Okay, we don't need to know the rest of that. And then a static rigid body, it cannot be animated. Okay, a dynamic object can bump into a static rigid body and bounce off of it, but the static body never reacts. The static rigid body is used for performance optimization because it supports concave physical shapes. Okay, so those are what the three different types are. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to select our plane, because our plane is going to stop all of our objects from falling through or or being impacted by gravity and falling out. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is come over to our modifiers and select MassFX rigid body modifier. Okay, we're going to apply that to the plane. Because we don't want it to be anything other than the ground, it will be static. It is not going to move. It is not going to be acted upon. It is going to be a static object. Okay, so we're just changing it to static. Now, we can come down here and it says physical material. And there are some presets. Cardboard, concrete, limestone, rubber, and steel. I'm going to just use concrete because concrete is very similar to asphalt, be the ground. You can also do your own. If you say none, you can adjust these numbers, but I have no idea what to put them for asphalt. So concrete's close enough. Okay, and we're good. Oops, shape type, that'll work. Okay, and so now what's going to happen is anything that comes in contact with our plane it's going to just, it's not going to be reacted by it, but it's going to prevent these objects from falling down to the ground. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is select all of our cubes. Whoops, do that over here because I don't want to select the car. Okay. MassFX, rigid body. We can select all of them and apply this because they're all going to be the same type. MassFX, rigid body. And it's going to take it a second to apply it to 100 objects. But you can select them all if they're the same and apply this all at once. And I have got to stop here and finish in the next video, or continue in the next video.